The Platting Board meeting will come to order. It is July 16th, and it is 6:31. May we have roll call, please?
Mr. Story? Mr. Abel?
Here.
Mr. Fuller?
Here.
Mr. Young?
Present.
Mr. Cole? Mr. Kange?
Here.
Mr. Edmondson?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Here.
Ms. Enix?
Excused.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a quorum tonight, and I have an announcement to make before we get started. Which one is it? Oh, it's right here. Is anyone in the audience here tonight for case F1B? It's the Fairview Subdivision Extension number 1. Okay, we'll move forward. I don't have an announcement. Okay, the first item on the agenda is approval of action summaries. May I have a positive motion to accept the action summaries of May 21st and June 4th? Mr. Kange, Mr. Fuller seconds. Is there any opposition or corrections? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. The next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes for June 4th. May I have a positive motion to approve these minutes for June 4th? Mr. Cole is the mover and Mr. Kane seconds. Is there any opposition? Are there any corrections? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries. Next item is special order of business and disclosures. Are there any disclosures tonight? Hearing and seeing none, we'll move forward. Oh, Mr. Edmondson, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry about that. But in case S12068 Hillcrest Park subdivision, I'd like to disclose that my company, the Peterson Group, is under contract to build a 15-unit senior housing project for St. Mary's Episcopal Church. The petitioner, Bob Bradley, is part of the church and is on the long-range planning committee, and I've had dealings with him. However, I don't have any knowledge of this case, don't have any personal interest, don't have any financial interest in this case, and feel like I can act impartially.
Thank you. May we have positive motion directing Mr. Edmondson to participate? Mr. Kange and Mr. Walker seconds. Mr. Kange, will you speak to your motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In case S12068, the Hillcrest Park subdivision, I move to direct Mr. Edmondson to participate in the case.
Thank you. Is there any, would you speak to your motion, please?
Thank you. Again, through the chair, based on Mr. Edmondson's statement, he has no knowledge of the case and no personal financial interest in the case, and he can act fairly in the case. I tend to support my motion.
Thank you. Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries. Mr. Edmondson, you're directed to participate. Are there any other disclosures? Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller, I think your microphone is off.
Sorry. Case S12081, U-Haul North Subdivision. I think it's appropriate to disclose that our companies have a couple of storage facilities in town, so I think I can impartially judge this, but I think it's necessary that I disclose.
Thank you. May I have a positive motion directing Mr. Fuller to participate? Mr. Walker and Mr. Edmondson seconds. Mr. Walker, will you state your motion and speak to your motion, please? Thank you. Is there any opposition or discussion on this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries. Mr. Fuller, you're directed to participate. Are there any other disclosures? The next item of business is, Mr. Fuller. Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is informational items, the abbreviated plat action summaries of June 9th, June 16th, and June 23rd. Are there any comments on these actions or summary of actions? Hearing and seeing none, we'll move forward. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, and there's a time extension for case S12082. First 18-month time extension request for the preliminary plat previously approved on November 7th, 2012, Saunders Subdivision, Tract B1A, plat number 2009-122, located within the southeast quarter of Section 30, Township 13 North, Range 3 West, Seward Meridian, Alaska. May I have a positive motion approving the consent agenda? Mr. Edmondson and Mr. Kane seconds. Is there any opposition? Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries. There's no old business tonight? No old business. The next item on the agenda is new business. And the first case is case S12068. Ooh, thank you. Before we get to that, the procedure by which the public may speak to the Platting Board at its meeting is, after the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the Commission Rules of Procedures. Petitioners, including all his or her representative, have 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. And the method of doing that is you'll tell us at the beginning, if you're a petitioner or petitioner's representative, you'll tell us at the beginning how much time you would like us to reserve for you. Otherwise, whatever time you have left over can still be used for rebuttal. Representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc. have 5 minutes, and individuals have 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the board. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the board. Any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Platting Board takes. Appeal of this decision or any of the conditions is governed by AMC 21.11.304. The decision of the board at the scheduled public hearing shall become final 7 calendar days after the date the decision is made on the record, unless a written request is submitted to the Planning Division prior to the expiration of the 7th day to prepare a written decision based upon the record made at the hearing, and the request is accompanied by a written notice of intent to appeal. Adoption of the written decision by the Platting Board becomes the final appealable decision. Within 20 days of the final appealable decision, an interested party must file with the municipal clerk either a written motion alleging new evidence or changed circumstances per AMC 21.11.503, or an appeal of the board's final appealable decisions per AMC 21.30. Our first case tonight is S12068, Hillcrest Park Subdivision. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request for vacation of the south 5 feet of the 25-foot screening easement found on Lot 5, Block 4, and modification of restrictive plat note number 4 of Plat 2002-8. This will allow the petitioner of Lot 5, Block 4, Hillcrest Park Subdivision to remove 5 feet of landscape screening easement and modify the associate plat note to site a proposed fourplex 5 feet further north to allow for additional snow storage and accommodate a 10-foot side yard setback along the south property line. The lot will be governed by the applicable zoning setback requirements in the R3 district and screening landscape standards. The subject property meets the minimum lot size and width required by the respective zoning district and other dimensional standards required by Title 21. Lot 5 is the last undeveloped lot within the Hillcrest Park subdivision. Lot 5 was created by Plat 2002-8. The underlying Plat 83410 placed a screening easement across the north property boundary between the old Seward Highway and the new Seward Highway, which was carried forward in 2002. The R3 district requires visual enhancement landscaping with a standard of an average minimum planting bed width of 8 feet. Because the property would be governed by a 20-foot screening easement that exceeds the required zoning width for landscaping, staff recommends vacation of 5 feet of the 25-foot screening easement. With that being said, the department recommends approval of the request to vacate the south 5 feet of the 25-foot screening easement, subject to the following A and B of staff packet, page 5 and 6. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the board, of the staff, excuse me? Thank you. The public hearing portion is now open, and the petitioner or the petitioner's representative has 10 minutes. Would you step forward, please?
Can I make a statement?
Are you the petitioner or represent the petitioner?
Pardon me, sir?
Are you the petitioner or do you represent the petitioner?
No,
Mr. Chairman.
a property owner in the neighborhood is on.
You'll, in just a moment, you'll have an opportunity. I'll make sure you have the opportunity. Yes?
I don't believe the petitioner's rep is here today or the petitioner's representative.
Okay. What is the board's wishes tonight to move forward and hear this case, or to postpone it till a petitioner is present? Mr. Kange.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question for staff. I might have hit my button a little bit too late, and that might give me a bit more clarity on whether or not I would move forward.
Go ahead.
I was just reading through your staff packet, and can you give any color on the Alaska Department of Transportation statement saying that they're not recommending this because of the screening would make maintenance of the drainage, and they use the word impossible?
Through the chair, Mr. Kange, so they're recommending that the application submitted is for an easement vacation. They're asking for other right-of-way that would be outside the authority of vacation request. As far as the overlap between the drainage easement and the screening easement, any maintenance within the drainage easement would be required to re-landscape the landscape easement,
Okay.
and that's found on the plat.
Thank you. That clarifies that for me.
Mr. Walker.
I would like to ask a question.
You may proceed.
I was curious whether this vacation would render the property consistent with the other properties along the street that it's neighboring.
Through the chair, Mr. Walker, yes, it would. It's consistent with the existing development along Alyssa Circle.
Thank you.
Sir, I'd just like to quiz the board if we want to go forward without a petitioner. You're nodding your head affirmative. Is there anybody who would like to delay this or postpone this?
I'm sorry, I pushed that button. I was thinking I pushed it wrong.
Mr. Cole, did you want to?
I was just going to say, I've expressed my concern about going forward when we don't have a representative. We've done it in the past when there's been no opposition. I mean, nobody coming in and saying that they were against it. I don't know what these people intend to think, but I have been a little bit reluctant in the past, and I've really agreed because there didn't seem to be, nothing was out of the ordinary, or there was no opposition. I'm a little bit concerned about his comment and the fact that we've got a person from the public here to talk about it, and we don't have the representative. That's my concerns.
I think we could move forward. If we hear adverse testimony from the public, we could vote on it and then put it on for a reconsideration afterwards, which would give us a second chance to reconsider it next month if there was something adverse. And give them a
I
second
thought
chance
if we
to appear.
ruled against them, they can't come back.
The petitioner could appeal our decision.
Well, we can also file a motion to reconsider within 24 hours. So we could vote in favor. And then you can only file a motion to reconsider if you vote in favor of it, though. Okay.
We have Mr. Kange next, and Mr. Whitfield, and Mr. Edmondson. Mr. Kange. Mr. Whitfield.
Mr. Chairman, to the board, this is certainly just suggestive or an idea, if the board wanted to hear testimony from the public and they, at that point in time, deemed that this was a case that could not go forward without the petitioner's representative or the petitioner here, then they could simply ask for a continuance to the next month and then hear the remaining portion of that next month. It's unfortunate that the petitioner's representative is not here, but if the board deems that they feel comfortable going forward, they can certainly do that.
Thank you. And if I may go out of turn, did the petitioner even address his or her intention of not participating tonight?
Mr. Chairman, to the board, no, the petitioner's representative or the petitioner did not express that they wouldn't be here tonight. There's another case, actually there's two other cases on the agenda tonight, and we don't have any petitioners here, which is somewhat odd, I have to admit. So if this is an issue in this case, it's likely to be an issue in the next case. So it's something to consider.
Thank you. Mr. Kange.
Just to that point, I know that we have heard cases in the past. However, there have been no public comments, and in this case, there were none presented in our packet. However, we have somebody from the, in the audience. So I would suggest maybe, as Dave had mentioned, maybe we hear what the member of the audience has to say and go from there. If there were no adverse comments, I would suggest moving forward, would be my take on it.
Mr. Edmondson.
Mr. Chair, I agree with a lot of what Mr. Cole has said, and also what Mr. Kange has said. I tend to get very uncomfortable to move forward on cases when the petitioner is not here. I get even more uncomfortable if there's testimony and the petitioner has no ability to address the concerns of the public. So I generally would support hearing the public testimony and making a decision once we hear the testimony, making a decision whether to move forward with the case or not.
Thank you. So addressing the board, one mechanism that I'm going to propose is that we go ahead with the public hearing tonight, but we don't close the public hearing, which means that next month the petitioner can come back and address the issues that come up, as long as we don't close the public hearing tonight. I'm sorry? So, let's ready to vote, see if we want to go forward or not. So, yes vote, we move forward and hear this case. And a no vote, we postpone until next month. Oh. Okay, so, I'm sorry, would somebody make a motion to,
I have a motion to proceed on the hearing. Go open the public hearing.
thank you, Mr. Walker and Mr. Cole seconds. And is there any opposition? So we don't have to vote. So hearing and seeing none, we're going to hear the case.
State that?
I'm sorry?
Can you restate that?
As to case number S12068, I move to open the public hearing.
And there's no opposition? Okay, the public hearing is now open, and you may come forward and testify. It's your turn. I ask that you state your name for the record and spell your last name for us, please, before you start.
My name is Fred Jacoby. I live at 9449 Alyssa Circle, so I'm just a short distance away from the proposed petition. Now, as I understand it, the easement is what we have a drainage easement, and is that the only easement that's being discussed here? And it's being adjusted 5 feet, as I understand it. But I noticed on your platting notes that I have a copy of, they're still expressing the easement as a 25-foot request. So we're, the language between those two documents is in conflict. Now, maybe that was just an unintended, but the platting minutes that I have a copy of back there is still describing the request as 25-foot setback and not 5 foot of the 25 foot. Do you have a copy of the platting minutes that was, I think it's a 3-page document?
I can pause and we can ask a question of staff.
So now this one, the one with all the different agencies' input, that indeed describes, and I've been assured by the gentleman up here at the right that we're looking at 5 feet, because the mailings I was receiving from the municipality, I received 3 mailings in total, and the first 2 mailings described 25 feet involved, and the last mailing described 5 feet of the 25 feet, going back, I guess, to the 20-foot mark. And so the platting minutes that I see here tonight that we were passed a copy of is once again discussing a 25-foot setback, not a 5-foot. So my question is this is the document that overrides the short platting minutes document? Is that correct, Mr. Young?
The document that we have tonight is the one that overrides.
Okay. And so we're talking about an easement for drainage, or are we talking about easement that has a dual purpose? Is there a drainage easement and an additional easement involved in that?
We can, I can stop the clock and we can ask staff the question for clarification.
Okay, sir.
Mr. Odell.
Through the chair to the board. The first mail out for the June 4th meeting, if the request was vacation of the 25-foot screening easement on the north property boundary. However, when we postponed that June 4th meeting and set to the July 16th meeting date, we remailed out flyers that have the correct request of vacation of the south 5 feet of the 25-foot screening easement. So it is noticed correct. The staff report reflects the correct vacation. And there is 2 easements located on that property. There's, on the north side, the north boundary of the property, there's a 20-foot drainage easement already existing. That's staying as it is. There's a 25-foot screening easement on the north property boundary, and that's being reduced down to 20 feet. So it's the south 5 feet. So now there, if this is approved, there'll be 2 easements. There'll be one drainage easement that's 20 feet, and then on top of that, there'll be a 25-foot screening easement. 20, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, a 20-foot screening easement.
Okay. And,
Could you spell your last name for us, please?
and I guess
could
the
you
only other concern I have is
Sir,
it's
sir.
not, maybe it's not apropos to what's being discussed here, but one thing we're seeing in the neighborhood is becoming a problem, and I don't know why, the parking in the duplexes with the amount of parking space that is offered to the tenants is adequate, but we're starting to see a great deal of curbside parking that interferes, with the mail delivery. And then in the winter, we see, especially on Morningside Loop, we haven't had that problem on Alyssa, but we've had it on Morningside Loop. And I guess going forward, I'm concerned if we have a fourplex put in at the end of Alyssa Circle, that if people are not making the space available in those driveways that are offered to them, and they have more than apparently 4 vehicles, then I think we're going to have problems with snow removal in the wintertime. Many times.
You've got to sum up. Your time is up.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you.
Can you spell your last name for us, please?
They want you to spell your last name.
Okay, I'm sorry. Name is spelled Jacoby. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to testify tonight? Mr. Kange. Oh, I'm sorry. But, Mr. Kange, did you have a question?
Just real quick for staff, there was a second mailing done, and I just wanted to verify that that was done in accordance with municipal code on the second standing, just allowing enough time just to verify.
Through the chair, Mr. Kange, yes, it was.
Thank you.
And Mr. Edmondson, do you have a question?
Yeah, actually, I have a question for Mr. Jacoby. I think that's how his name is.
Mr. Jacoby?
I apologize. My hearing from carrying a rocket launcher in the Marine Corps makes my hearing poor. Go ahead, sir.
Through the chair, Mr. Jacoby, do you have any objection to the vacation of the easement as it's outlined in this staff packet and as it was explained to you?
No, personally, I don't. I'm wondering. I did notice one negative comment in the packet from the Alaska DOT. They had a negative comment to make, and I guess that was the only document that I saw in the packet that did not endorse the project and the modification. So, but as I understand the modification, I don't have any objection. No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
You may testify. Before you start, state your name for the record and spell your last name, please.
Judy Jacoby, Jacoby. I just wanted to ask, I read in the petition that it says that the street will connect, these 2 streets, Long Street and Alyssa Circle will connect. And as I look at the plat of the direction here, is it really going to cut right across that driveway, right across their property? How is Long Street going to connect to Alyssa Circle?
Okay, we'll pause the clock, and we're going to ask staff to address that for you. But it's my understanding that the streets are not going to connect. Is that correct, that the DOT wanted them, but it's outside of the DOT's jurisdiction? But we'll get clarification from staff.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. We worked with ADOT to revise their comments. They stayed with what they had. They recommend that Alyssa Circle and Long Street should connect. However, That is not the case here. That asking for right-of-way was outside this request. At the time of the plat, would have been appropriate for ADOT to ask for right-of-way for those to connect. As stated, this is only just a vacation of the easement. There will not be a Alyssa Circle connecting the long street.
Okay. Also, I read a part of the petition that said that it would make it impossible to maintenance the drainage along that because of the easement. I think it's on the second page where the comments, it was DOT recommends against approving the screening easement request, allowing the drainage and the screening easement to overlap will make future maintenance of the drainage impossible. Boy, we worry about that drainage because, you know, the snow melts and we need the drainage. So I'd like clarification on that.
Okay, we'll stop the clock, and Mr. Whitfield is going to address that for you.
Through the chair, Mr. Jacoby, landscaping easements and drainage easements often overlap, and oftentimes you'll find that the state or municipal agency will need to maintain that drainage easement, and in those cases, they may need to take out landscaping. Landscaping is, and providing for landscaping, replacing landscaping is a requirement of the property owner. So they are required to maintain and in some circumstances replace landscaping. So in the event that the state DOT or a municipal agency needed to go in and do work within that drainage and landscape easement, it would be the responsibility of the property owner to replace any vegetation that may have been lost as a result of that maintenance.
And I would like to address that also in that it depends on how the landscaping is done, but the vegetation within a drainage way is a best management practice for managing stormwater and calming the water, slowing the flow down, preventing erosion, and allowing the sediment to fall out of the water. So depends on how the landscaping is done, it would be most likely a good thing. Go ahead, you have...
Okay, so then what they're saying when they say it's would the maintenance of it would be impossible, they're incorrect in their statement?
That's my understanding now.
Okay. And also in that same category, they are recommending that the streets connect, but the representative here is saying that the streets are not going to connect.
That's correct. They're not going to connect, and then that's outside of the DOT's jurisdiction. So no matter how much they want that, they don't have the jurisdiction to get that. And the traffic engineers have stated that they don't want this, the municipal traffic engineers have stated they don't want the streets to connect.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mrs. Jacoby?
No?
Mr. Walker has a question for you. Mrs. Jacoby, Mr. Walker has a question for you.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
Yes, Mr. Walker?
Do you have any objection to approval of the vacation?
No, I don't.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify tonight? Hearing and seeing nobody, what would, just 1 second. For discussion purposes to the board, do we want to go forward and close the public hearing, or do you want to table this and postpone this till next month? Okay. Would you make a motion, please, to go forward?
I move that we call for the question.
Is there a second? Mr. Kange, is there any opposition to going forward? I'm going to close the public hearing. Mr. Cole.
I'm just going to say, for the record, I don't have any opposition. Both witnesses or people that testified from the public stated they didn't have any opposition. We have some negative comments in the packet, but given the explanations by staff, I'm satisfied that we really don't have any opposition on that. And even though I don't, again, like it when we don't have a representative, it seems to me, from my perspective, that it's the better practice to move this forward and take up whether to approve the requested action.
Thank you. And Mr. Edmondson.
I just would like to say as well that I'm going to support the motion, and I concur with Mr. Cole's comments.
I'm going to support it also. Is there any opposition? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries. We're going to move forward. I now close the public hearing, and the matter rests with the board. May I have a positive motion, please, in this case? Mr. Walker is going to make the motion, and Mr. Emerson is going to second it. Mr. Walker, will you state your motion, please?
As to case S12068, Hillcrest Park Subdivision, I move the approval of the request to vacate the south 5 feet of the 25-foot screening easement, subject to the following condition: recording a resolution at the State of Alaska Department of District Recorder's Office.
Thank you. And will you speak to your motion, please?
I find that vacating the 5 feet of the landscaping easement in this case will be consistent with the neighborhood development. It will enhance the snow storage area on the property, and there is no opposition to the vacation of the easement, either in the community or otherwise. I find that the state comment that was made by the Department of Transportation, it's beyond their jurisdiction, and it is, I think, an improper statement that the drainage easement does not provide itself enough space or right to maintain the drainage easement itself, and that they had no right to use the 5-foot screening easement as space for the purpose of maintaining the drainage easement. Therefore, vacation of those 5 feet should have no bearing on their ability to maintain that space. Based on those, I would, and the other findings in the staff packet, I would approve the vacation.
Thank you. Is there any other comments or other findings? I'm intending to support this, and just a couple of things for the record and findings. The traffic engineering has no objections, which was stated on page 4. And on page 5, the vacation request has been reviewed and found to conform to the municipal vacation policy and ordinance. And also, because the property would be governed by a 20-foot screening easement that exceeds the required zoning width for landscaping, staff is recommending vacation of 5 feet of the 25-foot screening easement. So I will be supporting this. Is there any additional comments? Mr. Fuller.
Well, I'd like to make one additional comment on DOT, which is on the far east of the lot, and they still have 50 feet on their side. They really aren't even impacting them on the north side of the lot to the Seward Highway. So I think it's really overreaching for the Department of Transportation to even have any comment on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, any objection to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the for Part B? Mr. Walker. And
As the case S12068, I move for approval of the request to modify the restrictive plat note number 4 to state landscaping meeting the landscape standards of AMC 2145-125C3 shall be installed within the 30-foot screening easement along the east property boundary and the 20-foot screening easement along the north property boundary. All landscaping to be installed with the development of the property. All required landscaping to be maintained by the property owners for the life of the use. Plat 2002-8, located along the north boundary of Lot 5, Block 4, Hillcrest Park subdivision, subject to recording a resolution at the State of Alaska District Recorder's Office.
thank you. And Mr. Edmondson seconds that. Is there any discussion? Is there any opposition to the motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries. This plat is approved. The next item on the agenda is case S12078, Fairview Subdivision Extension 1, and the petitioner has requested to postpone. Is there a date to postpone to? To August 6th. May I have a positive motion to postpone this case till August 6th? Mr. Cole? And Mr. Walker seconds. Is there any opposition? The motion carries and this case is postponed. You guys are fast. The next case is case F1C is S12081 U-Haul North Subdivision. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This preliminary plat is a request for subdivision of 2 parcels of land into 1 lot with a variance from AMC 2180 300D design standards, lot dimensions. The width of a lot shall be at least 1/3 the depth of a lot. The plat is being done in preparation of redevelopment of the subject parcel as a self-storage facility. The petition site is zoned B3 General Business District. The proposed lot meets the minimum lot size and width required in the zoning district. With the platting action, the petitioner will be dedicating to right-of-way a 33-foot section line easement for Boundary Avenue. There was an ALTA survey provided by Accutech Geomatics that shows several structures that appear to encroach into the required side yard setbacks on the property. The petitioner, with this action, is required to establish non-conforming rights, obtain variances, or move the encroaching structures to conforming locations. There is a variance request with this action. As was stated, the petitioner is requesting a variance from 2180 300D. There are 4 standards required for granting of a variance, and I'll go through each standard separately. Standard number 1, staff finds this standard to be met. The existing property consists of 2 deeded parcels which are long and narrow and do not meet municipal requirements for a lot width to depth ratio. This plat proposes to vacate the interior lot lines separating the deeded parcels, and while not in conformance with municipal requirements for lot width to depth ratio, moves the property in the direction of conformity. Standard number 2, staff finds that this standard is met. The granting of this variance will not be detrimental to the public welfare or interest to other property in the area. All properties in the area provided access to publicly dedicated roads and will not be harmed in any way as a result of this variance. The granting of the variance will move the property in the direction of conformity with Municipal Code Title 21. Standard number 3, staff finds this standard to be met. The granting of the variance will not have the effect of nullifying the intent and purpose of the subdivision regulations. By approving this variance, it effectively allows the property owner to move closer to conformance with the subdivision regulations and the comprehensive plans. Standard number 4, staff finds this standard to be met. Strict compliance with the subdivision regulations would deny this subdivision the opportunity to move towards conformity with code. The proposed structures would be required to maintain setbacks from the interior lot lines separating the two lots, and would not allow the property owner to develop the property to its full potential. With that being said, staff would like to recommend approval of the variance, subject to recording of a suitable plat within 18 months, and approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to the conditions listed on pages 6 and 7 of your staff packet. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of staff? Again, we have a situation where the petitioner or the petitioner's representatives are not present tonight. There is opposition, or actually it's not opposition, but there's a public comment on page 38 asking for clarification. And I think before I say anything else, Mr. Cole, go ahead and speak.
I'm just going to, again, express my concern about hearing this, and it's for more than just what you've said. One of the other things that I think should be pointed out is that this is a variance request that requires the establishment of the 4 elements, and while staff has found that they exist, I'm, again, a little bit reluctant. And the other thing that I would note for the record is it seems to me there should be a representative. The property owner hired one. That's at least in the packet that I see, and I'm surprised that the representative is not here. I can kind of understand it if a property owner does it himself and then thinks that they're going to do it, but when you hire a representative, I would think that you would expect them to be here. I could be wrong on that, and of course that would be my inexperience, but I'm going to again express some concern about going forward when we don't have a representative and we do have some type of opposition or negative comments filed.
Thank you. Any other discussion? We'll let's have a motion to go forward, and we can do this like the last one, where at the end of the public testimony, if there is any testimony tonight, we can decide whether we want to close the hearing or postpone it. Oh, there's not going to be any public testimony, so the question is, do we want to proceed or do we want to postpone? And may I have a positive motion to proceed, please? Mr. Walker.
As the case S12081, I move that we proceed to close public hearing and resolve the matter.
And just one moment. Mr. Jacoby, I want to thank you for your service for carrying that rocket launcher. I know what that's like. Mr. Cole.
Getting my new hip, I'll be moving a little there.
Mr. Cole.
I was going to talk if we were going to have a discussion.
Let's get a second and then we can have a discussion. Mr. Fuller seconds, now we can have a discussion.
I'm willing to go along with everybody, but I'm going to vote no just because I think that at some point we need to send a message to people, particularly people that have hired representatives to be here, that we expect them to be here. We're here. We took the time. I don't agree with people not showing up, particularly when they've been hired, and so I'm going to vote no.
Thank you. And this is taking more of our time than usual also, because if they were here, we could address the issues, they could address the issues, and we wouldn't be having these discussions. So we have a motion on the floor, and we have opposition, so we're going to have a vote. And the motion carries. We have 1 no vote, and we have 6 positive votes. So we're going to move forward. We've had staff's presentation. Are you intending to testify tonight? And we have no one here to testify, so I don't have to open and close the public hearing? Okay. For the record, I'm going to open the public hearing, and for the record, there's nobody here to testify, and the petitioner and the petitioner's representative are not here also. So I'm now going to close the public testimony, and the matter rests with the board. May I have a positive motion to approve, and Mr. Walker.
As to case S12081, U-Haul North Subdivision, I move for the approval of the request for variance from AMC 2180 300D, the design standards, lot dimensions. The width of a lot shall be at least 1/3 the depth of the lot, subject to the following conditions. Record a suitable plat within 18 months of its approval.
Thank you. Mr. Edmonton seconds. Mr. Walker, will you speak to your motion, please?
Well, the variance request requires a finding of four items. I believe in this case that staff is correct that approving the variance request would allow the property owner to move closer to property conformity with respect to the lot width to depth ratio, which meets standard 1. With respect to standard 2, it's not going to be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the property in the area. Predominantly, the property as it sits, I think, is going to still continue to be used in the normal way, and the move will allow that property in the direction of conformity with Title 21. With respect to element 3, that the variance not have an effect nullifying the intent and purpose. Obviously, if the property owner is moving towards compliance by joining the properties, that you're not nullifying those provisions, and the undue hardship. If we were to require the owner to acquire more property before they could develop, basically they couldn't make the property improvements if we didn't allow them to make this change without going ahead and adding more property to make the lot to width meet the standard. So I would move that we approve this improvement.
Thank you. Is there any additional comments or discussion? Mr. Cole.
I'm going to vote against this for the reasons that I stated above, which is that the petitioner hasn't shown up. They had a representative that didn't show up. This requires a variance, which I think is a higher standard, and we have nothing here. In all due respect, I agree with the staff's counsel or staff's analysis, but and fourth, there is some negative comments from the public, and nobody's addressed that, and I'm troubled by that. And finally, I just think unless we start saying something to these people, it's going to continue to happen, and we're going to sit here in this empty room while we spend our time getting prepared for this, and they don't show up. I mean, I think at some point as a board we need to take a policy decision and say no or continue these. So I'll be voting no.
Thank you. And I would like to point out that with your no vote, it certainly shows the risk of what happens when you don't show up. So that's important. I have a question of staff for the public comments on page 38. Mr. Whitfield, will you address this comment, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. George Horton is actually an employee of DNR, and he oftentimes makes comments that should be reflected as reviewing agency comments. However, he uses the public forum to do so. So he is not a concerned member of the public, but rather a reviewing agency. And so he's actually a person that knows plats very well, and he oftentimes comments about section line easements. You'll probably notice that. But he is not a concerned member of the public. He is a reviewing agency representative, so I should state that.
Thank you. And was this issue resolved?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, review his comment 1 second. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, his comment will be, the validity of his comment will be basically hashed out during the survey review that is done by the municipal surveyor's office. If they deem what he says to be valid, then they will make those corrections with the final plat. But as we sit here tonight, I can't tell you whether or not he's correct or wrong. So I can't say yes that it's been addressed. No, it hasn't, but it will be, certainly.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments or questions? Mr. Fuller.
Yeah, in reference to Mr. Cole's comments, I don't take it personal that they don't show up. They've hired somebody, they've discussed it with the municipality, they're putting it in our hands, hoping that we make adequate decisions. Now, we don't know what they might have planned to be here and something happened, and so we don't know that. So the fact that they're not here, I can't take it personally, but I think they've covered all their bases and they put it in our hands, and we have to make that decision. So I don't see the necessity for them to be here at all times, especially when they've already got the recommendation and no objections. Thank you.
Thank you. I see it as a high-risk behavior, and that's their risk. But it has nothing to do with us. It's that they're the ones who are taking the risk. Sure. So we have a motion on the floor. We have opposition. Do we have any other comments before we take a vote? Any other questions? Okay, we will vote. A positive motion approves this plat, and a negative vote is no. And the motion carries 6-1.
We got one more motion yet.
We do have one more motion. Thank you. May I have a positive motion for approval of the plat for 18 months subject to the following conditions? You want everybody to do that? Everybody hit in the lower left-hand corner on the floor. Yes, Mr. Walker made the motion. Mr. Kanes is going to second the motion. Mr. Walker, will you speak to your motion?
As to S12081, U-Haul North Subdivision, I move for approval of the plat for 18 months subject to the conditions 1 through 8 found on pages 6 and 7 of the staff report.
Is there any discussion or questions? Hearing and seeing none, I have one. Mr. Whitfield, on item number 6 on page 7, one of the requirements or recommendations is to decommission the existing well and septic system with Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation. Shouldn't this be with the municipality of Anchorage on-site services under Title 15?
Mr. Chairman, I believe this is from the on-site section. I believe that they've stated that this is DEC jurisdiction and not theirs.
Okay.
So I'm simply going off of the comments from on-site, and they've said that it's DEC jurisdiction. So I'm using that.
Okay, thank you. I'll accept that. So are there any, is there any additional comments, findings? Is there any opposition to this motion?
I would like to
Mr.
make
Walker.
additional findings that the movement and their representative were not here, and by that they have consented to the department recommendations in their entirety, and have not stated any objection to any of these recommendations.
Thank you. Is there any opposition to this motion?
I have the same opposition that I've had before.
Mr. Cole, I think, for the record, would you state your opposition?
I'm concerned about going forward without having the representatives here on the record that we have in front of us. And
Thank
for
you.
the reasons that I said earlier.
Okay, thank you. So since there's opposition, we're going to vote. A yes vote approves, a no vote denies. And the motion carries 6 in favor, 1 opposed. That's it for our new business. We have no people, no appearance request, no other, no persons to be heard, reports. Not sure if the chair or the secretary should report, but our attendance is being monitored more closely than we thought, and some of our members are close to having more absences than we can allow. So I would like...
I think there is one rule we're not taking advantage of.
Oh, what's that?
If we had one more member added to the board, then we wouldn't be subject to the ratio of how many times you show up, so long as we have an alternate.
Oh, that's a good idea.
But we don't have an alternate. So by adding another person, that would free up the visitation, the appearance requirements.
We'll have to look into that. Thank you. Okay. Do we have any other board member comments tonight? We're down to board member comments. Hearing and seeing none, may we have a motion for adjournment? Okay, I will. Well, before we adjourn, I understand that we have a member who's leaving this board for another board. Is that correct?
I guess.
But you've been doing such a good job for us.
No, I didn't want to, my term was up in October. I planned on renewing, and then there was obviously asking planning, so that's why we're going.
Well, thank you. It's a very important commission. So can,
Split my time on this morning. No, I know, I don't want to. I like our board meetings.
well,
But I look forward to working with y'all in the future. In case it comes up, I'm happy to serve on the board again. I think it's been a great experience.
thank you. Okay, for motion to adjourn, Mr. Walker makes motion, Mr. Cole seconds. The meeting is adjourned. And it is it 7:35? All right, hour and 5 minutes.